Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to those who are here with us in person, our B'nai Mitzvah families, and to many, many more of you who are joining us via the live stream, whether whether on Facebook Live. We're so glad that you're here with us to welcome in Shabbat. Leave a comment, say hi, let us know that you're here, so we can wish you a Shabbat Shalom back. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Baruchuni l'Shalom. Malachei Hashalom, Malachei L'Sharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Seidchem l'Shalom, Malachei Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch
On Shabbat, we pause. We end our week with a break between the chaos, a chance to breathe in the calm, discovering a sense of rest, acknowledging how we have grown, and mourning what we have lost. On Shabbat, we gather. We exhale together, taking a collective moment as one community, finding comfort and joy embraced by this sacred congregation. On Shabbat, we wonder. We explore the mystery of creation, taking stock of how we engage with the awe-inspiring beauty of our world. We welcome Shabbat, a sanctuary in time, a time to pause, to gather, to wonder. Now let's bring in the light of Shabbat. We'll invite up the Lerner, the Manoff, and the Posner families to kindle our Shabbat lights.
As we light these Shabbat candles, we link ourselves with the generations of our people who have kindled these holy flames. Time passes quickly, and we take this moment to pause and express our gratitude.
We stand here as B'nai Mitzvah families with humility and with love for this occasion, for one another, and for being a part of this sacred community. As we participate in this age-old ritual, we embrace this moment as we move forward in the cycle of our lives.
Yesterday we held our children in our arms, and tomorrow they will not call to the Torah as the B'nai Mitzvah. These Shabbat candles not only remind us of the joy of this occasion, but help us to see the light within one another and give strength that each of us possesses. Grateful for all the precious gifts in our lives, we kindle the Sabbath light.
Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. My childhood musical Jewish education was shaped most in part by the CDs that my family would listen to in the car as my brothers and I were toted to and from activities. More often than not, the songs that filled my car were those of Jewish songwriters and song singers, particularly Debbie Friedman. Debbie was a prolific, prophetic, and deeply innovative Jewish composer who transformed the world of Jewish music. She saw the opportunity to expand our Reform musical settings that we had been accustomed to and to weave in the campy, folky sounds that the next generation would crave. Because of the music she wrote for our liturgy and for our children, we learned the Aleph Bet, we heard the stories of our prophets like Deborah, we know how to build a sukkah and what it must feel like to be a latke, and in our deepest moments of need for healing, we pray with her Mishaberach. It is not lost on us that the 10th yard site of Debbie Friedman's death falls on this Shabbat of the Torah portion, Beshalach, the week when we read the story of the crossing of the sea, the words of Mi Chamocha, or as we like to call it, the Song of the Sea. This in our moment in our yearly Torah cycle when we are supposed to raise our voices in song to God and of joy, and the partnership that it took us to leave Egypt and to be redeemed. While I didn't personally know Debbie Friedman, I believe that many of my teachers and her friends at what is now called the Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music at Hebrew Union College would agree that Debbie would love for us to sing in this Shabbat with her musical settings and teachings. And so that is what we will do. Throughout this service, we will sing many of Debbie Friedman's liturgical pieces, honoring a revolutionary leader in our Reformed Jewish musical world as we usher in a Shabbat of joy and song. Our Kabbalat Shabbat continues on page 3 with Zamru Ladonai. Zamru Ladonai Bechino Bechino Bechol Zimra Zamru Ladonai Bechino Lecha Dodi can be found on page 6.
Continue with Baruch Hu on page 8, and we invite you to please rise.
Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, v'chuchma poteach she'arim, uvitvuna mishaneh itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umesader et kochavim, v'mishmerotehem b'rakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei hoshech, v'hoshech mipnei or, uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil yom umevin laila, Adonai Tzavot Shemo, El Chai v'Kayam Tamid Imloch Aleinu Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love.
Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Our Michamocha comes from this week's Torah portion, the section, as Jenna mentioned at the beginning of the service, called the Song of the Sea, or Shirat Hayam. It's the words that the Israelites sang and spoke as they crossed the Red Sea and arrived on the other side. So we sing aloud, we reconnect with this moment of redemption, and we reaffirm our own blessings of freedom while committing to working towards the freedom of all people. We'll continue with the words of Micha Mocha.
She crafted her delight, a well-in-touch
a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long.
And Miriam the prophet took her timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed her just as she had planned. And Miriam raised her voice in song, she sang with praise and might. We've just lived through a miracle, we're gonna dance tonight. And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang a song. Sing a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long.
We'll continue with Hashkivenu, page 13. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomrenu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guard our going and coming to life and to peace evermore. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לטהרתה. ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת שבת וינפש, שבת שבת וינפש.
Rise for the blessings of the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibur ve'Hanara, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, ve'Konei Hakol, ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot, u'mevii geula libnei bneihem, le'ma'an shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshia u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye hakol, atah rav lehoshia, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללו הסלע. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Please be seated. At this point in our service, we pause to pray for those in our community and in our lives who are in need of healing of the body and healing of the spirit, maybe who are just in need of hope for tonight. Tonight in our community, we're thinking of Stanley Amsterdam, Cindy Baker, Alan Tilley, Robbie Palermo, Gerard Roos, Arlene Scheininger, Sharon Tillis, and Zohara Viva Bat Harav Moshe Vaharav Rahel. I invite you to share any names that you're thinking of, either out loud or hold them close in your hearts. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals the sick. Of the body, we turn to the healing of our world. As we join together, we pray for peace and a sense of balance. Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata melech Adon Bechol Hashalom.
we've mentioned a few times that this is a really special Shabbat because our Torah portion is this, within our Torah portion is this part of Torah called Song of the Sea. If you actually look at the Torah, it's a section that looks very different. The writing visually stands out. And the Song of the Sea begins, B'nai at Hashir Hazar will sing a song of praise to God. And this is in the moment that the Israelites have crossed the Red Sea. They've reached the land. It's a moment of exhale, a moment of triumph, a moment that symbolizes that their liberation from Egypt is finally here. So what do? They praise and reaffirm their faith in God. They count their blessings. They celebrate God's strength and God's role as a protector. They show their gratitude for their state survival towards freedom. The Israelites crossed the Red Sea. They ritualized this moment, celebrating all of these things, with coming together in song and dance. It's a communal moment to say, thank you, God, for bringing us here, for bringing us out of the narrowness, out of the grind, and bringing us to freedom. It makes me think about, what if we ritualized all of our moments, all of our big moments of gratitude? Maybe not always with song and dance, but as joyfully and as fully as the Israelites did on this day. So with a moment of gratitude for all the freedoms we have today, we'll take a few minutes to pray silently.
Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimeru amen.
So we are going to turn our attention for our guest speaker, Rabbi Wirtz and Rabbi Perlman, who are joining us on Zoom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Sorry about that. For some reason, my sound wasn't working. I assume you all hear me now. Good to see you all. I am here from Maplewood, Karen Perlman from South Orange, and our guest speaker from the Upper West Side. And I will introduce her now. We are so honored and privileged to welcome Erica Kesselman as our Shabbat evening speaker. Erica is a workplace strategist who has worked for the past 20 years with some of the most iconic brands in the world as a consultant, a speaker, author, and professional dot connector. She is the author of Bring Your Human to Work, 10 surefire ways to design a workplace that's good for people, great for business, and just might change the world. That came out in 2018. Her second book, which just came out literally 3 or 4 days ago, is called Rituals Roadmap, the human way to transform everyday routines into workplace magic. Erica's work and insights can be seen in varied media outlets, including Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Huffington Post, Oprah Magazine, Entrepreneur, Better Homes and Gardens, and so many more. She has been all over television this past week. She'll be all over television this coming week, and I think for several weeks. In fact, she was named one of Marshall Goldsmith's top 100 coaches in 2020. She is married to Jeff Kesselman, and they have 3 outstanding children I can attest to, Julia and Caroline, who I still cannot believe that they are turning 18 in the next few days. And Daniel, who's right behind them. They reside on the Upper West Side. And if you can't hear from my excitement, Erica is my sister-in-law. She's Lauren's sister. And this feels like all family, all home week. Rivka and Bruce Little were here 2 or 3 weeks ago to talk about raising Black children in a Jewish home. And Erica, who's been with us before for her first book, is back here again. And I'm incredibly proud because she is my sister-in-law and I love her. But I'm also incredibly moved by the work that she has done because it's really important for the workplace, for the synagogue, for the church, for the spiritual seeker. So Erica, welcome. I'm really, really happy to have you here with Karen and with TBJ.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I want to start by saying, I'm not sure if I ever told this story before. This is good. My own siblings always feel embarrassed by me sharing stories. I want to go to the Rutkin side and do a little embarrassing there. When I knew that I wanted to marry Lauren, which I knew probably by the 4th date, but I didn't tell anyone for many, many months after. And I really always fear that this will hurt my father-in-law's feelings, and I don't want it to be. It was more about me than it was about him. I decided that if I was going to marry Lauren, I needed to speak to Erica and Jeff first. And I don't even know why. That would seem like they were the gatekeepers in many respects. So I asked them for lunch, and I think they had an idea of what was going to go on. And in fact, I know they did because they came with a test of about 30 questions for me to answer and said they were not going to grant me permission to ask Lauren to marry me until I answered these 30 questions. And Erica and Jeff are really creative and really fun. And the last question was from Jeff. And if you're out there, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm going to needle you again. He said, when the family has the Passover Seder, who is going to lead? Will it be me, Jeff, the senior brother-in-law, after all they got married first, or me, Matthew Gewirtz, the rabbi? And I very quickly answered something like, of course you, Jeff, and I guess it would depend upon the household. But I really wondered if I was going to get like the permission to ask for Lauren's hand at that point. But why do I tell this all these years later? I mean, obviously Erica came with me to buy the ring, and they were the ones who went to right after, I asked with champagne they were waiting. So it's been an incredible relationship for well over 20 years now. But I tell this story because after all, that was a ritual, right? Jeff and Erica wanted to know, after Jeff had been established as the brother-in-law, as the son-in-law, who was going to run this Seder ritual. Such importance to us that before I was allowed in the family, there needed to be a signature of how this ritual was going to work. And it's worked well for all these years, but I was just thinking back to that as I was introducing your book. So Erica, you've written this extraordinary book on rituals, and I really want to get into, how rituals and workplaces get together before we get to the Jewish part of it. But maybe it's worthwhile starting with something that a rabbi might answer, but I'm going to instead have the rabbi's sister-in-law answer. How do we define ritual at all? Let's just make sure we're on the same page with that.
Right. So the way that I define ritual and the way that it's defined in the book is twofold. So the first part is a ritual is something to which we assign meaning, we assign value. It's also something that typically happens at a regular cadence, meaning there's repetition. It could be once a week, it could be once a year, it could be once a day. You know, we all saw during the inauguration last week, the inauguration rituals, which we know have a cadence of every 4 years. The second part of the definition I found to be very interesting, and something that I didn't know much about, is that a ritual is also something that goes beyond its practical purpose. So, for example, you know, I am in my room in New York City, and if the lights were to go out and if I were to light a candle to be able to see, that's not a ritual. But if I light a candle every day in the afternoon to signify the end of the work day and the beginning of the home day, which now is even more important with, you know, we're all working and living in the same place, and I do it every day, that's a ritual. And so it's almost this elevation of a routine that gives you meaning in your day and in your life.
So I want to give everyone the heads up that we have a really wonderful podcast that we started called Call Jeshurun, the Voice of Jeshurun. Before services, Rabbi Perlman and I interviewed Erica. So you should get, for a deeper dive, definitely do listen to our podcast this week. But one of the things we differentiated, Erica, there was the difference between mindlessness and intentionality. That, you know, mindlessness may be associated with habits that we don't think much about, but rituals that we care about are intentional. You want to say a word about that?
Yeah, it's that higher level of meaning. I mean, one of the things I often say is, left to our own devices, you know, we're not connecting, or we're not doing some of the things that we wished we were doing. But when something becomes a ritual, it has a deeper level of meaning around it. And I think earlier we talked about, you know, there almost is this transcendence. You know, I'll tell the short version. You know, when I used to go get a cup of coffee at Starbucks, that was a habit. I mean, you know, setting aside the caffeine addiction, but you'd go and I would get my coffee and do some work, and that was it. And one day I realized I hadn't even tasted it. And in that moment made this transition from a habit or a routine to a ritual. And now it's a really important part of my day, not just because I like the taste, but I get my coffee, I take the cup and I put it on my hands, I feel the heat, I take a few deep breaths. It's almost like a coffee meditation of sorts. I feel, and like that first sip, and just take a minute. It's a pause. And so while yes, I love the taste, and yes, it's nice to have some caffeine. And once, when my kids became teenagers, I changed my drink and added an extra shot. That all being said, it really is much more than a cup of coffee to me.
So, by the way, I'd like to know, is it a shot of caffeine or a shot of vodka when it comes to kids? So listen, you know, the question, so we get rituals in the synagogue. So I even get the ritual at Starbucks. Why would rituals ever impact return on investment in a company? That your book is really focused towards corporate profit. I know towards all of us, but how does one at all connect to the other?
Yeah. So the book's very interrelated with my first book that you mentioned, Bring Your Human to Work, which is that when you create a more human culture, it's good for people and good for business and good for the world. It was the trifecta in the first book, that none of those things are mutually exclusive. And this aha moment that I had after Bring Your Human to Work came out was that when I looked at all the people I had interviews from all different walks of life, to banks and law firms and Silicon Valley and not-for-profits, startups, that one of the tools that leaders were using in their workplaces when they were more human were rituals. They were using them as a tool, whether they realized it or not. And that all of a sudden I had this aha moment and was able to connect the dots across all of these examples in the book. And that was when I decided to do this deeper dive into rituals. And what I found was that rituals give us what I call the 3 Ps. And I'm very focused on the bottom line because, you know, spending 25 years in the human capital space, I got a little sick of everybody telling me that my work was a little, you know, on the touchy-feely side. You know, I wasn't the CFO. And so I always make sure to look both at the stories, but also the science behind why these things are important. And so I took the studies and I boiled them down to what I call the 3 Ps of rituals. And this is what rituals give us, both at work and at home. The first P is psychological safety, that rituals give us a sense of psychological safety and belonging. And in the workplace, when you feel that sense of belonging, you're much more likely to share your idea. There's much more likely to be diversity of thought and innovation. The second P is purpose, that rituals give us an opportunity every time we have a ritual to connect back to the purpose and the values of our company, our institution, even our own personal values. Add those two together and you get the third P, which is what you alluded to, which is performance. So human performance, if we have rituals in our lives, our stress goes down, our cortisol goes down, our oxytocin, that feel-good hormone goes up when we feel that we're connecting. But in addition to that, it's so interesting to look at the business performance, which found, there's so many studies, but just a couple, people that work for high trust organizations where they feel like they can truly bring their whole self, not leaving their real self at the door and, pretending to be somebody else, which quite frankly takes a lot of work and is mentally and physically exhausting. Those companies the people are 47% more collaborative and over 50% more productive. And the last piece is that, we know for years that the level, when we look at employee engagement, how engaged are people at work? On average across the country, it's 30%. So for those listening who work in companies, 70% of the people that work there are not so engaged. And so if we can use rituals to move the needle on those numbers, again, it's good for people, but can be unbelievable for business.
So Erica, your book, there's sort of a two-part question. So one is, you probably didn't know that there was going to be a global pandemic when you decided to write a book. But the last chapter of your book is called Rituals in Turbulent Times. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about rituals in COVID and how that became, because it really is a significant piece of the book, and how you integrated that into the work you did.
Yeah, so I did not foresee this pandemic. I probably would have had a lot of stock in Purell and some of these other companies if I had. But, the pandemic threw all of us for a loop. And the first thing I would say is, the pandemic has impacted all of us in very different ways. It's impacted us if we live alone. It's impacting us if we're stuck in a house with our kids who aren't going to school, or, my husband, who I love. But I had a post, one of my Instagram posts that I got more feedback on, mostly from my mom and my women friends, were my poor husband, who's not on Instagram, by the way, holding a plate of eggs. And I said, I love you, but not for lunch. You need to get out of the house and, go to the office. So it's impacting all of us. And what I found, personally and professionally, was that, rituals, they ground us, they bring some order out of chaos. And so when we started quarantining, the 5 of us up in Connecticut, when things were really stressful, we were still wiping down our groceries. My husband, we had a bunker full of food, which we were very lucky to have all that food. But even for teenagers, my kids are teenagers, and it was a scary time. So I did find that, having Taco Tuesday and keeping to our regular schedule, I did my Pilates that I've been doing every week on the same day with the same person at the same time. It does give you this sense of groundedness. And so I started there, and then I started reaching back out to many of the companies that were in the book before. And I called them and I said, guys, so many of your rituals that were described to me that were unbelievable, they took place inside your company, inside the walls. What are you doing now? And I want to share one quick example, because I think it's something that all of us can bring into our lives, again, whether it's personally or professionally. So the company is Udemy, the online learning company, and they have a huge culture around lunch. Everybody stops what they're doing at noon, big cafeteria. I visited, and it's only open. This is what I love too. It's talk about intention. It's only open from 12 to 1. So many of the companies that we read about, the Googles and the Facebooks, they have food all day. But at Udemy, it's an hour. And so I love, there was an intentionality around, we want people to bond and connect over lunch. And as an aside, when I was thinking about this the other day, when on earth are we going to go to a huge cafeteria with a buffet? I don't know, maybe 10 years. So they shut down and everybody went home. And another piece of their lunch ritual was that they had something called lunch roulette, where anybody could volunteer and say, you know what, I want to have lunch with 5 people at work. And the company would let them go out for lunch and they paid for it. So during the pandemic, what they found was that people were really, craving those rituals. I guess there's a little pun there, but yes, they were craving the food ritual, and they decided to give it a shot. So people could volunteer. They kept people on the same time zone together. So we're all on the East Coast. We would have lunch together. The company gave everybody a gift card. You could order lunch from your local sandwich joint, which people felt so good about, supporting their local place that hopefully it'll still be around when this pandemic ends. And they had lunch together. Now, the cynics, in the crowd on the Zoom might be saying, are you kidding me? Another Zoom? Do I really want to have another Zoom? I thought the same thing. But the reason why I want to share this example is that, Matthew, it goes to what you were saying. It's this, when something becomes a ritual, there's meaning around it. So because they were having lunch as part of a ritual, their values, it's important at Udemy to connect with other colleagues, and get to know people as people. No one was multitasking. People, they opted in, but there was a purpose. It goes back to the P's, and people would say to me, I remember why I like to work there. I remember I like the people that I work with, and it had so much meaning. And so, you'll see for those of you who get my newsletter, if you want to get it, you can get it on my website, but my newsletter next week, I just decided today, the title's going to be A Zoom is not a Zoom is not a Zoom. And it's not. And so all of us in our lives can figure out ways to make what we're doing more intentional and linked to purpose.
Erica, wow, there's so many directions we could go in. I want to ask you just one sort of maybe like a short question, which is, for those people who are by themselves, who are feeling really lonely in this pandemic, I mean, all the things you're talking about being with people. And so what's the ritual for someone who's by themselves and maybe struggling with how to find those P's when there's no people around?
Yeah, it is a really hard question, but I am hopeful. I do believe that rituals can help all of us. And so the second to last chapter in the book is called Design Your Own Roadmap. And it's thinking about the opportunities for rituals in your own life. So think about the day in your life, from, morning rituals. We talked about the coffee ritual, rituals around a meal, rituals around taking a break, rituals around the transition from work to home. A lot of people are doing these, faux commute rituals because they miss that, 20 minutes when they used to complain and they were in traffic. But think about your day and where you could insert and integrate rituals. So for me, I realized that I was missing some of my girlfriends. I'm used to seeing them, and I'm the one that plans the girls' trips. And so, and even with some friends out of town. So I have a ritual now with a friend where she lives in LA, I live in New York. She goes for a walk, I go for a walk, and we are literally on the good old fashioned phone. And we put in our earbuds, we get our steps in, and that has become a ritual. And so it goes back to intention. And I really do believe that, where there's a will, there's a way. And you have to start with your own values and saying, what's important to you? What's missing? It's coming to TBJ for Shabbat every Friday night and having that time to connect, or all the amazing online things that guys have been doing. I listened in every morning during that pandemic, and it was something that became a ritual, and it was a new ritual. So I think the two part is, think about rituals that you had before this pandemic. Are there rituals that you can maintain? Because there really is some psychological safety and stability in maintaining, but also think about new rituals and see this as an opportunity. The last piece is, and you all know this from what you do, whether it's mitzvah day or just in the line of work that both of you are in, that giving back has such a huge impact on us as people, on our health, on our wellness, on our level of happiness. And so I am seeing people get involved in rituals around giving back and volunteering and doing it online. There are so many different opportunities right now, but start with what's important to you.
So Karen, you're right. This is so unfair because there's so many more questions to ask. I'm watching our Facebook feed, and so many of you are talking to us about how this has become your ritual. And we don't even know, because there's Facebook, there's YouTube, there's StreamSpot, not all of them get back. So I'm looking at you, Lauren Hockman, who's telling us that this is becoming your ritual from New York City. And Erica, so many of our mutual friends and old friends are watching tonight. And so good to have all of you here plugging back in. Just give me one line, two lines on, maybe it hasn't, but how your Judaism spirituality may have been impacted by the work on this book, since after all, we've always thought about ritual as a religious practice, institutional religious practice, but you've taught us that all of us have rituals, if they're not necessarily Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, they just are human rituals.
Yeah.
Tell us if it's impacted your Judaism at all and how it might impact ours.
So when the pandemic started, and we were up in Connecticut, I remember we stopped at Stu Leonard's on the way up, and actually Jeff and the kids did. I was away with one of the kids. We were trying to bang out a bunch of college tours quickly before everything shut down. And we got up to Connecticut, and I had texted him and I said, make sure you get a brisket. And that first Friday when we were quarantined, just making that brisket and if for those you should go and listen to the podcast, we had a funny, very long chat about the brisket because it is a thing in our collective families of who's going to make the brisket. But I will say that even Matthew and Lauren's kids tend to like my brisket a little bit better sometimes. But there is something really powerful when you think of rituals about smells and taste and just your senses in general. And, as Jews, I'm sure many of us have a lot of food rituals because so many of our holidays are all about the food. But I will say that it made me think a lot about that ritual. I saw the sense of psychological safety and connection, even with my kids being nervous about the pandemic and coming together that first Friday as a family and knowing that we're going to be okay. As many know in the congregation, our mom died just, in April. So we were not that far in to this pandemic. And so being able to have, even online with the Zoom, some of those rituals around grief. So I have found that whether it's in my personal life, my religious life, my work life, I am seeing more and more that just how helpful having rituals can be. And some people will say to me, I don't know if I have any rituals. How do I know if something is a ritual? And I figured out after a year and a half of interviewing people that there was a question I could ask people when they were looking for a starting point. Where do I start? All of this sounds good, but where do I start? And the question I ask people is, what do you do in your life that makes you feel most like you? And during quarantine, when I thought about that as it relates to my family, how do we feel most like the Keswins? And, and it's Taco Tuesday. It's having Shabbat and having brisket. Lately it's been online poker. So you never know. We have a new ritual, even the kids.
There's so many comments I'll say for that, but two things. One is that the feed is going crazy on your brisket. Started with Lauren, who actually admits that your brisket is better than hers. And Renee Sherman is telling us that she's making brisket tonight, and cousin David loves your brisket. Everyone's commenting on the brisket. I think, and you said a lot of important things on the podcast and on this feed for Shabbat services, but I've never heard the definition before. I love the idea that ultimately finding ways of being ourselves is the most important thing we can do in relationship, in business, and anything that goes on out there. So if we could that's a great thing for all of us to do with intention tonight, to think about what things we might do by way of actions that help us be us. And if we could be us, I say this to Bar Bat Mitzvah kids all the time, to the three of you out there, that's all it takes. The smarts will work itself out, the jobs will work itself out, but being yourself really takes work. So Erica, thank you for helping us understand the path to us being ourselves, for putting a piece of work out there during an incredibly difficult and challenging time that has matched not just the moment of pre-COVID, but during COVID and I think post-COVID. And obviously, Lauren and I and our kids love you guys. But as the rabbi of this congregation, as Karen, as the rabbi, as Leah, Lucy, we just are so privileged to have you share your work with us. So folks, a couple of things. One is, if you want to be on Erica's newsletter, just be in touch with us and we will connect you to her newsletter. And more importantly, her book, which she would have been signing in person tonight, and we would have been eating her brisket tonight in person. None of that is happening, but it is called Rituals Roadmap: The Human Way to Transform Everyday Routines into Workplace Magic. It's McGraw Hill. You can get it on Amazon. It's done so well that Amazon sold out, but they have it again. And we have a case that's just arrived. And any of them that you want signed, I promise I'll get them signed. There's a lot more work to dig in here. Listen to the podcast, get her newsletter, and read the book. It's so worthwhile. Erica Keswin, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We love you. And
Thank you
Shabbat
so much, Erica. Shabbat Shalom.
Guys, come on.
Important food for thought, and I think inspires us to consider the ways that the meaning that rituals can play in our workplace, in our homes, in our lives. And again, just one more reminder, there's going to be more to that on our podcast this week, so don't forget to subscribe, Kol Jeshurun. And with that, we'll continue with our liturgy to begin to conclude our service with the words of Aleinu on page 19. Please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'tet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kachem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
We now come to the words of Mourner's Kaddish, the words that honor the lives of those in our families and our communities whom we have lost. As part of honoring their memory, if you hear the name of a loved one you may have lost and you feel so inclined, we invite you to rise to honor their memory. We're in a period of Shiva, the first 7 days of mourning, for Paul C. Rennert, father of Allison and David and Jill and Michael, grandfather of Alexandra, Jack and Claire, and Lindsay and Mia. We're saddened to announce the passing of Lois Goldberg, wife of the late Gerald Goldberg, mother of Sherry Goldberg and Michael, Nancy and Karen and Jeff, grandmother of Dan, Alexa, Lindsay, Bradley, Johnny, Noah, the late Zach Galinkin, and Lila Galinkin. Stephen Margulies, son of Edith and Leo, husband of Denise, father of Jason and Amy, and Lauren and John, brother of George and Roberta and Fran, grandfather of Leo, Hannah, Mia, Brody, Nolan, and Liv. We're saddened to announce the passing of Stephen Noxon. It's the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning for Shirley Abramson, Annette Feldman, Elizabeth Marie Frankel, Ronald Juster, and Vladimir Schneider. And it's the anniversary, the yard site of George Beck, Harry Black, Ignatz Block, Sadie Blum, Mildred J. Chordock, Rita Chodorkoff, Claire, Joseph E. Cohn, Harry T. Davamos, Harry Dondershine, Dr. Arthur J. Ellis, Harry Engel Sr., Flora Spine, Jeanette Strauss-Feist, Yaakov Feldshare, Madeline Felsenheld, Mayor Benjamin Foster, Bernath Friedman, William S. Furman, Martha Cohn-Gansler, Wolf Gillespie, Harold Galvin, David Gold, Gerald Allen Goldberg, Muriel S. Goldberg, William Goldstein, Kenneth G. Gordon, Ruth Gordon, Joseph Greenberg, Jeanette Harris, Leon O. Hart, Emmanuel Hersfeld, Jenny Hersfeld, George Hochberg, Adele H. Hoffman, Irving Hollander, Jill M. Holtz, Esther Weschler Jameson, Eva Walter Kahn, Helen R. Kaplan, Larry M. Catcher, Dr. Harry Kaufman, Josephine Kent, Joseph Jerome Kindler, Eve Baker Levison, Jeanette Levy, Franny Racklin Lewis, Harry Jacob Marcus, Paul Markin, Bernita Cashman Marks, Jenny Max, Rita Mayer, Eleanor Ziering Metzke, Sarah Stern Michael, Jack Negrode, Francis Strauss Newberger, Flora S. Newman, Sylvia Levy Nussbaum, Joel Edward Park, Alex Phillips, Ruth S. Pilchik, David Pollack, Mary H. Rosner, Moses Roth, Carolyn S. Schiff, Fanny Schwartz, Samuel Sellis, Tilly Tootsie Sicko, Irving Silver, Anna Snyder, Fred Strauss, Sophie Talkow, Sylvia Tidor, and George L. Van Mopus. And we'll rise together as one sacred community as we recite the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah b'richu. Ve'ela minkol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, huya asei shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing. Please be seated. And we have a lot happening in our community in the next few weeks. A few specific things to note. This Sunday at 7:30 p.m., there's going to be a conversation about compassion and COVID. Rabbi Perlman will be in conversation with Debbie Evans and Jordan Feingold about the impact of COVID on ourselves, our relationships in the larger world, talking about empathy and judgment and balance in these times of uncertainty. It's going to be a really wonderful conversation. I encourage you to be there 7:30 p.m. on Sunday, and then on Tuesday, there is another, say, very important conversation, a different kind, but it is called the Isms Facing Jewish Students on Campus. It's a discussion of how the AJC is helping Jewish and pro-Israel students deal with rising anti-Semitism, hostile campus climates, and mounting attempts to boycott and delegitimize the state of Israel. Rabbi Gortz will be in conversation with Seffi Kogan from the AJC. I encourage high school students, college students, parents, community members. It's an important conversation for everybody. Again, our podcast, subscribe, Cole Jeshurun, and before all of those things, though, tomorrow morning, we have three very exciting moments happening. Three of our really wonderful young people are here and are being called to Torah tomorrow morning. So, as we almost conclude our service. I know it's been a long time, and we're really excited to invite you up to lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. So we'll have David and Reese and Shane. There's a spot for each of you. And what you have there is underneath the lid with your name on it, there is a Kiddush cup. It is clean, and it is a gift from our congregation's Brotherhood and Women's Association, and we hope that you'll use it, not just today, but for many, many really important and wonderful moments to come in your lives. And I'll let you guys take the tops off those and take it away. 1, 2, 3.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kinashanu b'mitzvotav ratzah b'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinhi lanu zikaron lama'aseh v'reshit Ki hu yom tehila lemikra kodesh zeher litziat mitzrayim kivanu v'harta kidanu mikol hamim kodsheha be'ahava uvratzon hinhatanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lehem min haaretz.
Amen.
Excellent job, you guys. We take your challah and go have a seat as we close out with Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom, Imramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'yakol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen. Oseh Shalom, Imramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'yakol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.